What's going on, everyone? I am meteorologist Mike Linden. I'm joined by meteorologist Matthew Cappucci. We are tracking Hurricane Ian, which is now a Category 2 hurricane as it begins to work its way northward. We have the latest path from the National Hurricane Center. We are going to show you that in a moment. We've got a jam-packed show for you this evening. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We are going to be answering your questions as the stream goes on. So, of course, ask us your questions if you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and hello to our people watching on Twitch as well. So let's jump right in here before we get to the rest of the show and take a look at the latest path from the National Hurricane Center. Again, as it stands right now, Hurricane Ian, a Category 2 hurricane, those wind speeds up near around 98 miles per hour. And it is expected to become a major hurricane, that being Category 3 or above, as it works its way toward western Cuba. As that happens, working our way into Tuesday, we will likely see Ian take yet another step up toward a Category 4 hurricane that's just off the western coastline of the Florida Keys. A hurricane warning now in place for the Florida Keys that stretches from the Dry Tortugas inland toward Key West. Then this is where things started to change a little bit as we've worked our way through the day today. The National Hurricane Center continues to nudge this thing closer toward Tampa Bay. That includes Tampa, Sarasota, Fort Myers, Spring Hill, all part of what is now a hurricane warning. That's that red color there. Now, you can see that the expectation is for Hurricane Ian to weaken toward a Category 1 hurricane just off the coastline of Clearwater there. But the wind does not tell the whole story in this instance here. So again, we've got a lot to chat about here, and I actually had an opportunity earlier today to chat with Juliette Kayyem. You might have seen her before on MyRadar. She is a disaster management specialist. She used to work under President Obama for the Department of Homeland Security. Again, disaster management before and after, that is her expertise. And I had the opportunity to chat with her about what this area of Florida can expect from those emergency management officials on the ground. What are disaster managers doing? I mean, right now, the storm is still well south of Florida, is working its way northward and will likely impact Cuba in quite a major way. But what are the federal emergency managers and even local emergency managers? What are they dealing with right now?
Okay, so it's always starting at the local. So think of it. So it's the local folks who are going to have a sense of evacuation routes, what your population looks like, communities in need, communities that may need extra assistance. So it's the local emergency managers are feeding that information into the state apparatus, which Florida is pretty sophisticated, which is now getting an inventory of where the needs might be. The state emergency management office is then working with FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency, to say, here's what we anticipate. The Federal Emergency Management Agency and the White House are not waiting. They've already declared an emergency. They're already going to surge resources. They're already going to push the ability to help, but whether it's military assistance, helicopters, whatever else. So, but we do have this waiting period. So all you can do is pre-position and hope that populations protect themselves either through the evacuation or through the sheltering in place. It's not a time to goof off. It really, or to sort of mull it over, right? I mean, in other words, like these people know. So that's basically how it works. Local, state, then federal, as we wait. But the evacuations, my understanding is, are occurring now. And I think exactly for the reason that you said, which is these are new growth populations that are not familiar with this process.
I'm going to now bring in meteorologist Matthew Cappucci. Matt, we've been following, of course, this system as it works its way northward. The expectation all along is we were expecting it to get rather strong, but man, is it starting to hustle now on its way northward, and it looks like the National Hurricane Center a bit more bullish now on that intensification as it works its way now closer to what is a vulnerable coastline of Florida.
Yeah, most definitely. The folks at the National Hurricane Center are absolutely pros when it comes to this. They forecast this intensity very well because the ingredients are just really favoring rapid intensification. The bigger wild card for us has been the waffling back and forth of computer models and subsequently trying to predict impacts here in Florida. We'll kind of get to that in just a second. Here's where the storm is right now. So here's the Isla de Juventud. Here again, you see right here is where Cuba is, and this thing is just churning northwards right now. Winds over 100 miles an hour. You're not really seeing an eye quite yet, but I do suspect one will eventually start to form kind of right over here. These are hut towers, very elevated convection or shower and thunderstorm activity, really just blossoming south of the core. When you see these purples, that means very tall, very cold cloud tops. So again, the cooler temperatures, higher in the atmosphere, those clouds are growing taller. The storms are really just kind of quite rambunctious. To show you what these temperatures are like, we're talking minus 80 Celsius, so way below like minus 120 Fahrenheit at the top of the lower atmosphere, what we call the troposphere. So really, we're kind of poking the ceiling of the lower atmosphere, showing you this is a very powerful storm. When we take a look at visible satellites, we're looking at infrared right now, but we'll show you visible just to give you a picture of what this actually looks like from the sky. Again, this is the GOES East Weather Satellite, about 22,236 miles above the ground. You're noticing as the sun sets, you're kind of seeing it more at an angle, you're able to see the overshooting top, the kind of ripples of the convection of that thunderstorm activity in the high upper atmosphere. Even a few little ripples kind of radiating outwards. We call these gravity waves. Picture wavelets undulating at the surface of the top of the lower atmosphere, kind of causing these things to radiate outwards. Very impressive stuff there. So this thing is kind of getting supercharged right now. And water temperatures, as we take a look at tropical tidbits, water temperatures are above where they should be. For starters, they're like 29 to 30 degrees Celsius in this part of the tropics. In fact, the only place globally, so here we are, this part of the tropics, the only place globally where we have about equally warm, if not warmer, water temperatures, a little bit north of, looks like the kind of maritime continent. Here's Australia right here. So these are the warmest water temperatures for like 8,000 miles in any direction, meaning this is just hurricane fuel. And that's why this thing is able to do exactly what it is doing. So that's why this thing really is rapidly intensifying. So here's the latest pass from the National Hurricane Center's hurricane hunters who work in accordance with the Air Force. Basically, they fly a plane inside the storm looking around for the winds that we can't necessarily see from above. And what they do, thank you, what they eventually do, they're kind of going through it. They're driving through and really trying to figure out what the winds are like. And notice their pass. Each time they found lower air pressure, they started at 983 millibars. So basically the weight of the atmosphere on top of any given point, they got down to 978. So what that means is the storm is lifting more air up. There's less in the way of air pressure because less air on top of you, so the pressure is going down. That means there's kind of missing air in the middle of the storm, a deficit of air, and that means it's sucking in more air and the winds are growing stronger. You see, the strongest winds are really east of the center right now, but they're starting to wrap around like this. We're seeing a little more symmetry. Not a ton of crazy wind, not a ton of crazy wind on the southwestern side, but the fact that we have southeast, east, northeast, and north of the center means it is starting to really just kind of become symmetric into quite the impressive storm here. This thing is getting bad. It will get worse. We'll talk much more technically in just a few minutes, but Mike, I understand you have more information to share.
Yes, we actually have a special guest to bring in, somebody that you may have seen on the MyRadar YouTube channel, across the MyRadar app, and he is a tropical weather expert. Again, he has a meteorological phenomenon named after him. Of course, I'm talking about Dr. David Ruglicki. David, yesterday I was trying to make Dr. Hurricane stick. I don't know if it will, but of course, a great nickname for you. We're so glad to have you. Of course, we'll have you live in studio tomorrow as this storm really begins to gain some juice here. But we wanted to bring you in now so you can kind of give us a bit of a deeper dive on this storm as it works its way northward. So first off, how are you this evening, and what's up with Hurricane Ian?
I'm doing okay. For those who don't know, where my family and I were in Lakeland, Florida, halfway between Tampa and Orlando. So my wife just got word today that Polk County schools will be closed on Tuesday and Wednesday. And I believe there's a mandatory evacuation order for at least the county that Tampa's in, Hillsborough, I think. So yeah, no, this is, things are starting to look a little dicier here on the model simulations. So if we go to the observations that Matt was showing before from the flights, so I just want to let you know that there are 3 planes currently in the air. There's an Air Force, there's a NOAA P3 that does the flying into the storm, and then there's the G4, which flies on top of the storm. So those things are out there right now. And is that the microwave satellite imagery. So this is these are your aircraft recon. Now, if we jump to the the microwave satellite imagery, and we actually got really lucky, is that just a couple hours ago, we had 2 satellite passes, 2 microwave satellite passes. And this is from the Naval Research Laboratory out in Monterey, where I used to work. And just to remind everyone, this is 37 gigahertz. And this allows you to see low-level rain in the storm. So what we're looking at here is that the center is now fully enclosed by precipitation at low levels. And if we jump to 80, I believe it's 89 gigahertz with the GPM, you actually get some more ice scatterers here. So what looks like going on is that there are very intense convective towers that are wrapping around the storm. We actually had another pass after GPM this is from I believe AMSR 2. So what's going on here is that we have convective cells that are wrapping around the center, and the microwave is seeing it. We can see stuff on infrared that Matt showed us before, but the microwave that allows us to peer down beneath the cloud shield and show us that indeed Ian is wrapping itself up right now. Now, just to emphasize,
I was going to say, David, so when it comes to, when you say wrapping up, I mean, we're starting to see it continuing to strengthen. Now, it's likely to impact Cuba here over the next 6 to 12 hours. Will that have any impacts on the real structure of the storm as it passes through?
So stronger storms actually do worse over terrain, is that the more major hurricanes have a lot farther to fall in terms of intensity. Now, when it comes to weaker storms, they can actually survive traversing the island a lot better than weaker storms. So it's a bit of a paradox here, is that since Ian hasn't completely pulled itself together quite yet, it does stand a little bit better chance of surviving the terrain over Cuba. More importantly, I think, is that, as Matt alluded to, is that the sea surface temperatures that this thing is going over are some of the warmest on the planet right now. And it's not only that the sea surface temperatures are warm, because you see we're around 31 degrees Celsius, which is where Ian is going. But if you look at the depth of the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm, and 26 is historically used for favorable conditions for tropical cyclogenesis intensification, you'll see that the isotherm is generally pretty deep. And another thing we want to talk about is the ocean heat content. So where Ian is right now, it's exceedingly warm, and it looks like it has gulped in some dry air, but the most recent microwave passes indicate that potentially it's starting to finally figure itself out. You can only stem these really warm sea surface temperatures for so long.
Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure myself out too. So one question I have, you talked about how terrain can influence storms, of course, like this. I'm wondering what the eye structure may be like, or how the terrain may affect the inner eye. Sometimes we see eye wall replacement cycles be jarred by passages over land. Sometimes we see the storm lose organization inside. When you have water temperatures like this, how easy is it for a storm to sort of rebuild its inner core if it's affected? And what are you expecting as the storm actually moves over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico with those warm water temperatures?
So I think that this is probably, it's under the gun here to form a major. All the forecasts right here have it reaching major intensity status. So right now, I think it's just a matter of time. And since the waters are so warm on either side of Cuba, like, don't get me wrong, they're significantly warmer on the southern side, but they're still warm, right? I don't want to downplay that. So I think that a major hurricane is in our future, barring something completely unforeseen. I think, it might look a little ragged coming off the island, but also you have to remember it's forecast to move over probably the narrowest part of Cuba. So it's the land impacts are probably not going to be as bad as if it were going over like Hispaniola or something like that.
I have a rather technical question, and for audience at home, we have different types of weather models. Some are what we call global models, which are a little broader, a little more coarse, but they focus on the overall pattern of the atmosphere. There are some models that we use better for forecasting tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, like the HRRR, the High Resolution Rapid Refresh. And there are some models that are much better tuned to tropical cyclones. Behind me right now, for example, we have the output from the HMON, one of the specific hurricane models, which is rather disconcerting at this point. What advantages do we as meteorologists have over using global models when it comes to hurricanes? Like, why are the hurricane models better in scenarios like this, or are they actually better?
Depends. Oh, always, it depends. But what hurricane models allow you to do is it allows you to resolve inner core convection a lot better. So when we talk about models, one of the things we talk about is grid spacing or resolution. So grid spacing in mesoscale models is a lot finer, so you can actually resolve a lot of finer scale features that you wouldn't get in a global model. Now, to get a little technical here, you can't resolve everything. And we have to approximate these effects with things like parameterizations, like microphysics, like water changing phase, or boundary layer turbulence, or gravity wave drag in the stratosphere. That's a little way outside the scope of this discussion. But the appeal of the mesoscale models is that they do give you, at the most basic level, finer resolution, so you can actually capture tighter gradients. Because then in a hurricane, you talked about the pressure falls, right? Well, the change in the pressure from the lowest pressure in the eye to just outside the eye wall, those gradients could be 20, 30, 40 hectopascals, millibars. And that's a lot, that's enormous. So models have to be able to resolve those gradients. And that's what mesoscale models buy us.
David, so as this works its way toward Tampa, we're talking about a city that is somewhat vulnerable, right? Why is that?
Well, it's primarily due to the fact that a hurricane making landfall from this direction, I don't think has happened since 1947. And it was an unnamed storm at the time. The storms weren't even named at that time. So that's part of the issue, is that, if you think about Miami, for example, after a major hurricane passes like Andrew, you reevaluate building codes, and things that weren't up to code just sadly get demolished. But in Tampa, it's been 70, 80 years since a storm was moving up in this direction. I believe it was Charlie. There was some storm that had a similar path a while ago, but the fact that Ian is moving so close to the coast, that's the cause for alarm, is that the Tampa Bay itself just hasn't seen storm surge of basically any serious kind in 70 to 80 years.
Dr. Aglicki, I have a question, because there are so many spaghetti models that people are used to seeing. I actually made a plot earlier on showing a couple different types of models. So for the folks at home, we have deterministic and ensemble models. Ensemble model basically meaning we take the same model, we tweak it a little bit each time, we tweak the starting point, we tweak the starting characteristics, the initial conditions, and then we run it a bunch of times to simulate a wide range of possibilities. So over the past however long, we took a look at all the midday models and found that the European ensemble model was arguably the most concerning for Tampa. It shows track right into downtown Tampa at about Category 2 strength, maybe higher end Category 2 approaching Cat 3, but also the fact that it's going right near Tampa Bay and slowing down and then backing up would just swirl a ton of water towards the coastline, induce a really significant, 5 to 10 foot storm surge and 80 to 110 mile an hour wind gusts. The GFS deterministic model, so the main American model, not the tweaked one, not the simulated range of possibilities, shows something very similar. So two of our most reliable models showing that. Then we take a look at some of the counterparts, the European deterministic. So the main Euro is a little farther offshore, still concerning because, of course, hurricanes spin counterclockwise. This would still be pushing a ton of water towards the coast, but likely closer to 5 to 8 feet of inundation. And then the GFS ensemble model is the big blue line right here. It's kind of the farthest offshore. That's the sort of average of all the different blue squiggles. So, Dr. Aglicki, my question is sort of this. How is it possible that we have the GFS deterministic, so like the main American model, so far apart from the average of all of its different tweaked members? And likewise, how is it possible that we have the European ensemble, so kind of simulating the range of possibilities with the worst case scenario track, and the main European model is farther offshore. Is there a way we know which one to trust more? Sort of, where should we kind of go with our gut instinct at this point?
In terms of the European model, historically, it usually has been better with track, although with the small, I was looking at a figure from the National Hurricane Center earlier today during the HRD discussions that the GFS is actually outperforming the European model when it comes to track, but it's very small data set. Now, the issue here is that to understand the difference between deterministic and ensembles, when it comes, well, first of all, they're run at different resolutions. So the deterministic GFS and the deterministic ECMWF are run at much higher resolutions than their ensemble counterparts. Now, when it comes to the ensembles, you have to remember, you're not just perturbing the storm, you're also perturbing the global environment. And really what it comes down to with this storm is the trough that's digging over to the eastern United States, which actually, if you go back, was affected quite significantly by Fiona making landfall in Canada. So I think a part of it is at that point, the $5 word, which I think $50 sentences here, right? It's called a stochastic, which is basically chaotic or ordered chaos. And it can come down to simple differences in convective perturbations or things like that, in the Western Pacific that changes the Rossby wave pattern over the United States. So it could be conceivably anything from anywhere. In post-season, a lot of academic studies do look at, for example, OB sensitivity studies or ensemble sensitivity studies to figure out where that is. But right now, it really comes down to how much does Ian get pulled up by the trough that is exiting? And models are now moving towards it's not going to be caught by the trough. You were talking about storm surge. That's one issue, but the fact that Ian's going to be slowing down, now it's a rainfall threat. And I'm much more concerned about where I'm living right now, a little bit inland. That's a big concern for me right now.
Dr. Dave, we really could talk to you, I think, all night. It seems like you got quite a few fans in the chat here, which is awesome. Again, if you guys are watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you're watching from, if you have any questions for Dr. Hurricane, get it in the comments. We will, of course, have much more from Dr. Ruglicki. David, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Again, we will have Dr. David here in studio live tomorrow afternoon into the evening. Going to be getting his John Madden on and drawing on the satellite imagery. We're really excited to have him. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Wasn't that fun? That was great. We have so many fun people in the chat here. Some folks, very interesting chat so far this evening. I want to add in, before we get to continuing with the show here, we did this yesterday, and we want to do it again. We are well on our way to almost 100,000 or so followers on Twitter. So we are going to be giving away a copy of Mr. Cappucci's book. It is Looking Up the True Adventures of a Storm-Chasing Weather Nerd. To win a copy of this book, which may or may not be autographed, but again, only the winner is going to find that out, you've got to follow us on Twitter and send us a direct message and let us know where you are watching from. We had some people watching us from Wales yesterday, from Swansea. Yeah, Cappucci?
Oh, I just said wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. We had folks really from all over the world watching us yesterday, and it seems like we probably still have more of them. So again, let us know where you're watching from. Send us a DM on Twitter at MyRadarWX. You can see it above my head there. He worked very hard on that book. It's a great read. Not just saying that because he's my coworker. It's a great book. I highly suggest that you check it out if you are not the winner. But again, DM us. You can see it right above my head there at MyRadarWX. Send us a DM. Let us know where you are watching from. So before we get to rolling on here with the show, earlier today I had a chance to speak with Leslie Chapman Henderson, the CEO of FLASH, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. They are really the tip of the spear when it comes to making sure that you and yours are staying safe during this hurricane season. The campaign #HurricaneStrong is something they have been really trying to get out there, and it seems like folks more and more are starting to follow some of those guidelines. And earlier today, I had a chance to speak with Leslie regarding maybe what some of the misconceptions are for people that are preparing, particularly those that live along the western coast of Florida. I know one of the biggest misconceptions for folks is to rush out, board up their home using tape. And of course, that is certainly not something that you recommend. What would you recommend that folks do in order to make sure that their windows, doors, and things are properly secured?
Sure. So let's talk about wind safety, right? Which means you have to protect your openings. Openings are windows, doors, garage doors, big deal, because 90+% of the time when the wind breaches your house, it happens with the garage door because it's your largest and weakest opening. Also, things like gable end vents. So how do you protect those openings? Well, you may have shutters already. You need to put them up. You may have impact resistant glass windows. You need to find out if you have those. The window will be etched. It will say so with the approval stamp right there. If you don't have either of those, you still do have time to use plywood of a certain thickness, 5/8 inch is what we recommend, and cut to fit plywood boards to put over those openings that are at risk, especially those with glass, right? So there's a checklist that will guide you through how to do it. It's a really great activity to team up with your neighbors and friends. You board up their house, they come help you board up your house. It reduces stress and strain, and then you can make sure that the boards stay in place when the wind comes. Don't put masking tape on the glass. That's an old myth, but it's unfortunately a deadly myth. In Hurricane Charlie, eerily similar path to Ian's track so far, or projected potential track, the first fatality was to someone standing behind a glass sliding door protected with flimsy solar film. They thought that that would save them by keeping the glass intact. Unfortunately, what tape and film and duct tape, and we get these questions, they're like, what about duct tape? We love duct tape, but not for this, right? The problem with it is the tape makes the glass into larger shards, and you're still going to get the broken glass, but those shards become larger, and unfortunately, in that gentleman's case in Charlie, deadly as well. So don't tape your windows. It's also a heck of a mess to clean up afterwards.
Right. And of course, there are items outside of your home as well that can become quite deadly as well, with hurricane strength and tropical storm force winds lofting those items and taking them into potentially your house or even into your neighbor's yard. What are some of the things that you would recommend that folks do outside of their home to make sure that they're prepared for the oncoming storm?
That's a perfect question. So you need to go kind of on a missile hunt. You walk around your yard and you look at every single thing that could potentially be picked up by the wind and be turned into a missile that can then in turn damage your home, your roof, or your neighbor's roof. So we're talking dead limbs and trees, but don't start cutting any limbs if you don't have anywhere to put them before the storm, right? Garden gnomes, garden decor, swing sets. We hear a lot of stories after the storm. People go, oh, I forgot to take the swing off the swing set and it battered the window through the whole storm. Barbecue grills, lawn furniture. Some people recommend, we will not recommend it, but in a last ditch effort, sometimes people pitch their lawn furniture into the pool. Desperate measures. And I always like to say, just in case preparation is way better than just in time, because the stress level goes up and up. But go all the way around the house and look for anything that can become airborne. At my house, it's potted plants, and there are so many, and the garage is full of them right now because I live in Tallahassee, because we don't know what's going to happen. By the time for sure, it's usually too late to do anything about it. So that's a big part of wind safety as well, because those missiles are not just dangerous, to you, but they also create tons of damage.
There's many things that you can do to be hurricane strong, but if you go to hurricanestrong.org, Flash has got you covered. So here I am on the website. All you have to do is scroll down a little bit. Right here, these 5 buttons. You have Know Your Evacuation Zone, Preparedness, Resilience, Insurance, and Service. All of these are different checklists here. So you can actually see it right down here, Hurricane Strong checklist. Put it all right in front of you. But I wanted to show you guys this. This is so cool. So on safety, if you do not know your evacuation zone, because evacuations have already begun for some communities in Western Florida, all you have to do is go to hurricanestrong.org. Again, tap on that. Scroll down a little bit, see, find your evacuation zone, tap on Get the List, and it's going to open up this PDF here that is fully clickable, for lack of a better term. And it's not just Florida. You can find your evacuation zone for any state in the United States. Now, you can tap on Florida there, but what I'm actually going to do is in just a moment tap on Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa is. Now, one thing I would like to add, likely that county's website is being overloaded right now with the number of people that are trying to access it. So if you do run into any slow response times, just know it is not just you likely tapping on this link, but I'm going to do so. There we go. Load it up pretty quickly. And how about this? The entire map of Hillsborough County, you can see colors there for you and numbers, so that way you know your evacuation zone. So when you hear local officials say, for example, zone 1, zone 2, you will know where to go. Those are a list of shelters as well. Really, really great stuff. In fact, let me jump back here. We're going to go back again to the main portion of hurricanestrong.org. You can hit on preparedness here. Make a plan, build a kit. Fantastic information here. Again, giving you, a lot of lead for what you should be doing in order to make sure you and yours are safe, including having some cash. Of course, banks and ATMs certainly not going to be open for extended periods if you are dealing with a hurricane coming your way. Water, food, at least for 3 or so days in the event of a power outage. Mobile power bank to make sure that your cell phone is fully charged in case you need to check the MyRadar app to know where Ian is. Or, of course, if you need to reach out to emergency officials as well. A flashlight, batteries, and so on and so forth. There's so much amazing information on hurricanestrong.org. Big shout out to Leslie and the folks at Flash for the work that they do. Of course, they have Tornado Strong as well. They've got you covered all year round. But before we send it back to Mr. Cappucci here, again, I want to reiterate that if you are watching on our YouTube channel, click on that thumbs up button. It really helps us break through the YouTube algorithm, as we have just seen fantastic numbers here over the past couple of days, let alone how many people are watching. We just want to be sure that folks out there are hearing the information that we are seeing, or rather the forecast that we are seeing, and getting it out to the folks that really see it. So again, click on that like button. And of course, if you are not already, subscribe to the channel with those notifications turned on. Click on that little bell. That way you always know whenever we drop a new video, or of course, whenever we go live. For the folks here watching us, again, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, we're even on LinkedIn too, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're going to take some time to answer some of your questions here. But Cappucci, I see that you've got, is that the winds up?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's chat about it, man.
Yeah, so earlier on, Dr. David was talking about sort of a trough or a dip in the jet stream within which is nestled cool air, low pressure, and spin. Now, the trough is important because this is the main steering influence in the atmosphere over the lower 48 that may or may not capture Ian and drag it northwards. So here's the American GFS model. Again, our storm is located down here. By the way, you notice overhead of our storm, clockwise winds, which helps with outflow or the exhaust of air outside the storm. The more air that goes out at the top, the more that can be sucked into the bottom and fuel the storm's intensification. Anywho, so this is where that dip is right now. And over these next several days, here's kind of a good example showing sort of what to expect. So we put this model, again, here's the American model in the future, and this is coming in right now. This is the latest model. Our storm goes over western Cuba, and then it starts to recurve off to the east. Now, this is the 18Z GFS, and Mike, one thing I'm noticing here, you really see this trough pick up and drag the storm. So here's the storm, this kind of donut of wind. Here's that trough, pulling it eastwards. Initially, the American model did not expect this to occur. Now we're seeing more signs of kind of tugging this storm even closer to the coastline. I suspect with the next National Hurricane Center update, they'll probably push their cone even farther east because, again, this is the American GFS model 18Z. This model wasn't available when we started the stream earlier on. This is brand new and pretty concerning signs with this. So, again, this is likely tugging the storm farther east. Eventually, one other thing I'm noticing, too, watching this model, the storm kind of starts to run up. Then look, it just stalls for 6, 12, 18, 24 hours, then moves farther inland, so very concerning there. We can take a look at the same thing on the European model. Again, very similar trends. The storm a little farther offshore than look makes it a curve eastwards at the last minute, gets captured by this trough. Very disconcerting news. So again, let's kind of show you what's going on with this storm, because ultimately, we know where it is right now. We'll go back to the HMON model. So here's where it is right now. Okay, it's pushing through Cuba. It'll be intense tonight. Let's put this on just so you can see. So we're expecting the storm to be like this, Cuba being right here, and then eventually this model, this is a hurricane-specific model, has it intensifying to a Cat 4 over the southeastern Gulf. Florida Keys way down here, so they're way outside the storm, but still seeing gusty to strong winds. But then watch, as we head towards later Wednesday, we start seeing spiral rain bands across southwest Florida. So Naples, Fort Myers, Immokalee, 84, the Alligator Alley. All these areas could be watching the spiral rain bands move through, and these could produce very heavy downpours and the potential for a few tornadoes as well. Then watch what happens. This thing makes a right-hand turn, and it's just sitting here, pushing water against the coastline, and it's dumping moisture, especially northeast of the center. Now, one thing I'm noticing, I think we might actually see a rainfall jackpot in northeast Florida, away from the storm center. They'll see a ton of rainfall down here too, but really one thing to note, they could actually see what we call a predecessor rain event, or kind of an interaction between the cold front off the north and east and heavy rain from the tropics, or heavy moisture from the tropics in a part sort of away from the storm as those feeder bands really get going, and it's just looking pretty bad. So I want to talk more about track, because one thing we've been talking about is yes, the storm's sort of outrunning the best ingredients, the strongest ingredients that favor really a Category 4 storm in the southeastern Gulf. So it's going to peak as a Category 4. It will weaken eventually, but notice, even by the time we head towards Wednesday, so like 72 hours out, actually like 48 to 72, it's still between a Cat 3 and a Cat 1. So its average wind speed would be somewhere between like 85 and 120 miles an hour. So this is still coming towards the coastline in Florida as a really formidable storm from a wind standpoint. But we have a litany of other hazards too, because it'll be pushing water against the coastline. So if this thing stalls just off the coast, counterclockwise winds wrapping in like this, that means onshore flow. We have about a 3 to 5 foot storm surge the Keys all the way towards roughly the Caloosahatchee River, farther north, Port Charlotte, Charlotte Harbor, Englewood, middle of Longboat Key rather, 4 to 7 feet, and then Tampa Bay, 5 to 10 feet, and that's above ordinarily dry ground. Keep in mind, this is kind of a reasonable worst case scenario, but still very disconcerting to see up to 10 feet of surge in a very populous area. You know, keep in mind, the Keys are only like 3-ish feet, 3-4 feet above sea level. This could be a problem for places like Duval Street in Key West. Same thing here, a lot of really low-lying areas near the coastline. The beaches are pretty, but they're not very high above the water, obviously, by virtue of being beaches. So a lot of coastal communities could see inundation. And it's very concerning to see this thing just sort of sitting and parking. So we take a look, too, at rainfall, by the way. Now the National Hurricane Center is also highlighting this area in northeast Florida near Jacksonville, seeing up to about 10 to 15 inches of rain when all is said and done. We'll also see a ton of rain offshore, too, pushing towards the Big Bend, near Homosassa Springs, north of Tampa Bay. So everybody in the orange, it's more than half a foot of rain, which we've had a lot of rain down here lately. This could cause additional flooding with antecedent conditions already moist. But look, offshore, about 20 inches. Some models trying to push this closer towards the coastline. So, we're talking coastal flooding, but also inland freshwater flooding too. One other thing I want to mention before I toss back to you, Mike, is the potential for a few tornadoes. We talked those spiral rain bands. We'll go back to that HMOD model and show you as early as tomorrow evening into early Wednesday, we'll see a few of these rotating squalls pushing to southwest Florida, and eventually they'll kind of meander up even towards Orlando. So we're well inland here at the MyRadar headquarters in Orlando. Surge obviously won't be an issue for us. We'll see less in the way of winds, but a few rotating thunderstorms and isolated tropical tornadoes could occur as well as we head towards Wednesday, Thursday. So here's the Storm Prediction Center's outlook for tomorrow, Tuesday. A level 2 out of 5 slight risk for severe weather, mainly for that potential for a few tornadoes. We head towards Wednesday, same exact thing, similar areas, now including Orlando, Melbourne, Fort Myers, Lake Okeechobee, Jacksonville, areas to the north as well, Tampa. So really, you want to make sure you have a way to be notified. And Mike, one of the best things about the MyRadar app, we give you real-time weather alerts. If the Weather Service issues a tornado warning, we get it to you ASAP. It'll notify you anytime, day or night. It really can be a lifesaver.
Absolutely. And of course, that's why having a mobile power bank, let alone all of the other supplies you need. And again, folks, in the comments here, we're not trying to overhype or get you scared in any sense. We're just trying to provide you with the best information to make sure that you and yours stay safe. You always want to be prepared for an instance like this. And as Cappucci was just saying, I mean, there's the potential for severe weather with this. The wind is just a small part of the story. We're talking a lot of heavy rainfall, which could lead to potential power outages, that tornado threat. And I see you folks in the comments saying that the tornadoes are the real wild card. You're right. I mean, that is certainly something to not overlook, that hurricanes can spawn those tornadoes. Notice as well, even where we are here in Orlando, which is centrally located, even for folks on the Space Coast, Titusville, Cape Canaveral, Melbourne, under a tropical storm watch. And remember, that's not the side that Ian is coming from. So again, that wind field extending pretty far inland as this thing begins to work its way northward. Matt in the back there, if you want to pull up the graphics here on the computer, I want to show folks this. Cappucci was just talking about this, but the storm surge flooding is really something to not overlook here, folks. Remember, as this gigantic heat engine works its way toward Florida, it is going to be pushing a lot of water that does not belong inland. You can see along the Florida Keys, greater than 3 feet of it. In fact, as we work our way northward, you can see those little specks of red there. That is upwards, as we touched on before, of 9 to 10 feet of water above the ground, right? So that's water that, again, is not supposed to be there, that is being pushed by the storm that extends northeastward toward Fort Myers, Naples, and up towards Sarasota and Tampa. And this is really where I want to key in on, because it is this area right here into Tampa Bay that, as it stands right now, we'll look at it in just a moment, as it stands right now with the current cone from the National Hurricane Center, that Ian is expected to pass very close, if not go right over top of Tampa Bay. So this is a part of Florida that could be particularly vulnerable. So again, for people that live in and around this area, I'm going to zoom in even more here. Stand by, folks. There we go. Hang on a moment.
And,
there
Mike,
we go.
One thing, if I may.
Go for it.
Back during Irma in 2017,
a storm that folks in Central Florida, I mean, still talk about to this day, mind you.
Oh, yeah, and that wasn't even the worst case scenario. Like, if that had trended even just slightly farther east, it would have been way worse. But one thing with that storm, folks actually saw water leave Tampa Bay first, because they're getting kind of the offshore winds first, depending on where the track of the storm went. In that case, they got offshore winds. So Tampa Bay went partially dry, and then the water came back all at once, and the Weather Service actually issued a flash flood emergency for Tampa Bay, and kind of an unprecedented alert of that type. So I want to emphasize, we were talking about earlier on, run from the water, hide from the wind, but even if folks see the water leave the beach, it can and will come back. We just got to iron out where exactly the storm is going, but surge danger is definitely there.
Now, I mean, it's really impossible to say at this point to know exactly where it is going, but that's, of course, why the folks at the National Hurricane Center are the Navy SEALs, the very, very tip of the spear of tropical weather forecasting, and they are doing a phenomenal job at making sure everyone is well aware of what is happening. So those folks are incredible, really the best at what they do. But Cappucci, if we look again at this storm surge flooding graphic here, particularly worrying and continuing to be so as we continue to see that cone drift farther and farther inland. As you touched on before, if we do around 11 o'clock tonight from the cone see this come even more inland, it is likely that you start to see a lot more red on this graphic here. Again, I mean, look, if I'm zooming in here, we're going to take a look here at the Rocky Creek area. I mean, that's, again, upwards of 10 feet of water working its way pretty far inland. And again, this is right now with the cone of Ian being just to the west of this area. So again, if we do see this drift farther inland, we will likely see those numbers go up even higher. Remember, the number one killer when it comes to natural disasters is inland flooding, let alone wind, lightning, all of these things that come from severe weather. It is water. That is the number one thing to watch out for here. And let alone this potential inland flooding, you're going to see a lot of rainfall from this as well. Take a look at this graphic here. I'm going to advance to it in just a moment. Before I do that, again, you can see that even as far northward as Horseshoe Beach and even up near Tallahassee, just to the south of it there along the coastline near the Big Bend, could be looking at several feet of storm surge. Now, this is the rainfall potential over just the next 3 days. Wow. And again, big numbers there. You can see that purple color there. That's upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain, upwards of 7 to 20 inches of rain right there near Tampa. I'm going to zoom all the way in here. Anywhere where you're seeing a yellow color is close to 2 feet of rain. That is a lot of rain, let alone the near 10 feet of water that could be coming in off of the coastline. So again, Cappucci, water going to really be a huge player for this. And of course, ironically, these hurricanes are fueled by such warm water, incredibly warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. We touched on before, those sea surface temperatures, some of the warmest on the planet Earth, are right here off of the coast, the west coast of Florida. So again, people in the comments here asking what they should be doing at this point in time. Again, you still have plenty of time to prepare. I highly suggest that you make sure that, again, you have food and water to at least last you 3 days. Don't forget about your pets as well. Make sure that you have pet food. Now's the time to make sure that you have any kind of medication that you might need. If you're kind of toward the end of your medication here, you certainly have enough time at this point to make sure that you can have a refill for you and your community members that again, now's the time to really look out for your neighbors. Trying to see, we've got a lot of comments here rolling in. We've got people watching in Tennessee, people watching, of course, in Tampa. I see you, John, on YouTube. I mean, again, we're not trying to overhype things, folks. That's not our job. We are just trying to present to you the information that we are seeing. And what we are seeing is that cone continuing to track farther inland. And again, Cappucci, you just had up there, if we want to, Matt, bring in Cappucci there. He's got that same graphic from the NHC. Again, I suspect that we are going to see a lot more of that red color there, again, closer to Tampa Bay here as we work our way into Tuesday.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, a track slightly offshore would be better from a wind standpoint, but worse for a storm surge standpoint, because keep in mind, if we have the track going like this, which is where it's going right now, counterclockwise winds, you're pushing water towards the coastline. Now, one thing I want to point out, if we can, and bear with me, I cannot type and talk at the same time, bathymetry.
Challenge accepted, huh?
Here we go. So I want to show you what's called the bathymetry of Florida, meaning the slope of the seafloor. Again, we'll show you, here's an awesome chart from NOAA. We'll take a look right here and kind of zoom in on this. And what this does is show you roughly the elevation of the seafloor and the shape of it. You'll notice right off the coast of Florida, a lot of red. So meaning it's very shallow, but look just how shallow it is for how long. Like as wide as the peninsula is, go another 150 miles and it's still comparatively shallow offshore. Now picture you're helping move your friend out of an apartment, putting all the stuff in a truck. You're wheeling stuff up a ramp from the dolly into the back of the truck. If the ramp is like this, it's going to be really difficult to put that stuff in the truck. It's going to be pushing like this. It'll be a challenge. But if the ramp is really long and really gently sloped, it is so easy to walk right up that ramp. Same thing here. Now, if you have a track like this, you're pushing water towards a coastline like this, it is so incredibly easy to push all this water up the gently sloping continental shelf right into western Florida. So that's why it doesn't even take a major hurricane to bring a devastating storm surge. Not saying this will be devastating. Again, 5-10 feet is kind of the worst case scenario.
That's a lot of water, though.
That's
a lot of water that's not supposed to be there.
And if that's realized for folks,
that's the deep end of a swimming pool.
Oh, of course. And keep in mind, that's not just above sea level. That's above ordinarily dry ground,
right,
which is the biggest concern with this. So, anytime we have even a low-end hurricane in this part of the world, surge becomes a big issue. Tack on the fact this might be a Cat 2 to approaching Cat 3 by the time it nears Florida. That's a big issue, too. Now, another thing, too, I want to go back to this map, okay? Two different maps we're juggling. Here's a map for storm surge. Again, the worst near Tampa Bay. You'll notice nothing listed north. I think this might fill in a little while later. We're just kind of trying to figure out just how bad it'll be. So here's storm surge. Here's rainfall. Notice where the jackpots are. Same areas. So you'll have water being pushed against the coastline from the ocean. You'll have water that falls as rain trying to drain out to sea from rather antecedent wet conditions already. And the water that falls won't be able to drain out, so it'll just cause a lot of flooding chaos. So really, this part of Florida, Tampa Bay to like Orlando, we're going to have some big-time issues with flooding. I want to go back to that tornado risk, too. We talked about the Storm Prediction Center's outlook for potential severe weather. Here's as we head towards Wednesday. Everyone in the yellow, that chance of a few tropical tornadoes. Mike, I've chased tropical tornadoes plenty of times before, and one of the issues with them, the cloud bases are so low. We have low LCLs, or lifting condensation levels, as a result of just how much moisture is in the air. So you cannot see them, you cannot hear them coming. They're very erratic. You might not get warnings. So you have to prepare for that too. Well, if we go back over to, I want to show you this. So this is what we call the HREF model. And basically, this shows you where we might have rotating updrafts. Notice tomorrow afternoon, over the Keys, so the storm center's down here, but over the Keys, a lot of rotating thunderstorms possible, rotating squalls. They might not actually have any thunder and lightning. South Florida overnight into Wednesday morning. So even after dark, you might still get a tornado warning. That's why it's great to have the app ready to go. And believe it or not, we might actually shift the threat of a few tornadoes towards like the Space Coast on the eastern coast of Florida, even though the storm center is over here, as we head later into Wednesday and eventually towards Thursday as well. So definitely big concerns. Here's a high-resolution model showing us kind of what we can expect these next few days with this storm. Again, the HRRR, by the way, a convective allowing model, brings the storm right into Tampa, so a worst-case scenario track there too. But notice this, by tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, all across South Florida, even Miami, not really in the cone right now, not in like the heart of where the actual tropical cyclone will go, but they could still see some rotating storms, but really all across South Florida near Alligator Alley, that highway they have down there, the Everglades. And then look, as we head towards like Wednesday morning, down towards like Naples, Fort Myers, Caloosahatchee River, up and down that part of Florida, and eventually spreading northwards as well. Even Orlando as we head towards Wednesday afternoon. You know, we're right up here. Here we go. Notice the kind of kidney bean shape with some of these. Even over here in the Atlantic. So the model is doing a good job simulating a very sheared environment, so changing winds with height, thanks, of course, to the hurricane itself, that will favor individual rain cells and kind of individual squall lines rotating, producing that risk of a couple tornadoes. I want to tack on, if we can, a severe weather helicity. This shows you how much spin is in the lowest levels of the atmosphere. And look at this. There's just a ton of spin to work with. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen an environment with that much like 0 to 3 kilometer helicity. So really, the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere is like 10,000 feet. A lot of spin there. And if we simulate updraft helicity tracks, you know, you see all these little kind of blips concerning right there. Let's actually do, there we go. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, so this is CAPE, or convective available potential energy. This shows you how much juice is in the atmosphere. And because the storm is swirling north, so much warm, humid air, the atmosphere will actually be pretty unstable in the red area. So a lot of rotating thunderstorms possible with this, in addition to all the other hazards like.
Yeah, I mean, you were touching on before, tornadoes, never really fun to deal with. The key there is whether or not you can see them. Tornadoes at night and tornadoes wrapped up in rain, those are the concerns. And with Ian working its way northward, we could certainly see some of those rain-wrapped tornadoes, which, again, you cannot see them until it's too late. So that's why you need to make sure that you are following along and aware of what is happening around you. If you guys want to take the app really quickly, and again, big shout out to our partners at WeatherBell. Those are the models that Cappucci's showing you there. Amazing stuff to see there, whether it be the ensembles, the high-res models, so much great stuff. So big shout out to WeatherBell. Look here, again, this is the track from the National Hurricane Center. You can see that center line there, right? Just off the west coast of Sarasota there, not far whatsoever. Again, this is the track. Look how close it is to Tampa. So again, while we may not see a landfall there, and again, that may soon change, I'm just going off of the track that we have right now from the NHC. If this thing shifts just a little bit eastward, then again, you are likely to see those numbers come a bit higher in terms of the potential storm surge impacts there. As Cappucci touched on before, when you divide a hurricane into the 4 quadrants, so if you guys can take me here, I like using this example here. You divide a hurricane like this, right? You have your 4 quadrants. It's that right front portion of the hurricane where you're likely to find the strongest winds outside of the eye wall and the tornado development, as well as some really heavy rain. Of course, in this part of the world, hurricanes, or tropical cyclones, I should say, rotate counterclockwise. So imagine when you're swinging a baseball bat, that right front quadrant is where you're making contact with the ball. So a lot happening right there in that zone. And with this track, again, as it works its way kind of up I-4 in central Florida, that means a lot of rain for the Tampa Bay area, a lot of rain to inland Florida, including portions of like Gainesville, Ocala, the Villages, Deltona, Orlando. Again, you can see that kind of pinkish color there. That, again, is a tropical storm watch. Disney World is under that tropical storm watch. And in fact, I believe that Walt Disney World is going to potentially be waiving some fees here for folks that have been booking trips there. So big, that's kind of big. That's big, folks. With when you know Disney World's starting to react, that's where things really get cooking. I see you folks in the comments here. Big shout out to Joseph there. MyRadar, the best weather app in the world. Well, you know, I'm going to agree with you there, Joseph. Now, for the folks that are watching on the live stream, again, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, we're even, of course, in the app too. I want to reiterate that we're giving away a copy of Mr. Cappucci's book, Looking Up, The True Adventures of a Storm-Chasing Weather Nerd. That guy has chased a lot of weather in his life thus far, and the book is a great read. Here's how we're giving it away. You can see the Twitter handle right above my head right there and point to it right now, at MyRadarWX. You got to be following us. That's step 1. Step 2, you got to slide into our DMs and let us know where you are watching from.
You know, I got my first negative book review today. Everything else has been positive. You know what they said? Too much weather.
What do you expect? What do you expect?
It's called True Adventures of a Storm-Chasing Weather Nerd. There's going to be some weather in there.
Too much weather. That's
and you know what I love? Our audience right now, we're all weather nerds. We're kind of geeking out, of course. Yeah, it's a serious situation, but Yeah, it's a good book for weather nerds. By the way, you know, we were talking moments ago that right front quadrant. While you're doing that, I pulled up a graphic that I'd love to show if we can.
Hit it.
So this is a cool paper written in 2007-2008 that looks back at all the tornadoes spawned by tropical cyclones over the years, and they divvied up where in the storm these tornadoes formed. So here's what we call the right front quadrant. Notice most of the tornadoes, here's a whole storm kind of like this. Most of the tornadoes form ahead of and to the right of the center. Now, why is that? Let's say this thing is moving in this general direction, spinning like this. All these winds are towards wherever it's making landfall, but the surface winds slow down, meaning friction, the kind of feeling the effects of land, they slow down. At the upper levels, the winds are still going. So you get the most change in wind speed in or direction with height, i.e. wind shear in this area, because the surface winds slow down. Just above it, the winds are still screaming. That causes anything there that spans multiple layers of the atmosphere, so individual downpours or rain cells, to feel a rotation, a twisting force, causing most tornadoes to form up here. You know, Hurricane Ivan back in 2004 produced like 120-something tornadoes. Beulah in 1967, I think made, was it 108? I don't remember right off the top of my head, but Beulah and Ivan kind of set the record for how many tornadoes can form. But yeah, it's pretty easy to get tornadoes to spin up during environments like this, and everything I'm seeing is making me think we will get some tropical tornadoes.
That monitor wall really doing a lot of work there, seemingly drawing the 4 quadrants for you there almost perfectly.
I am loving this.
How about that? So for folks that are watching again in the comments, we're going to be going live for just a little bit longer, so that way, folks, we can get ready for the next update. That would be, again, at around 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That's when we'll have the next big update to the cone from the NHC, at that point, it seems like all signs point to this track moving a bit farther inland close to the Tampa area, which is certainly something that is getting a lot of attention in the meteorological world, and it deserves your attention as well. So again, if you live along the western coastline of Florida, just going to show you the MyRadar app here once again here. I'm going to turn off the hurricane tracker layer for just a moment here so you can see the west coast of Florida. Anywhere where you're seeing this really dark pink color, that is a hurricane warning, and that stretches from north of Tampa, St. Pete, all the way south into Sarasota and toward the Fort Myers area off the coastline there. So this is kind of where the National Weather Service, being that they are lockstep with the NHC, all part of the same company, again, that being NOAA, it seems like this is the area in which they're beginning to narrow in on. It's certainly possible that we see that work its way northward here as the track begins to adjust and kind of work its final adjustments here over the next 2 or so days. But for the people that live in that area, you need to be doing your preparations now. Again, food and water to last you at least 3 days. Make sure your mobile power banks are nice and charged up. I saw someone in the comments here on YouTube not long ago that reiterated a really excellent point, Cappucci, that if you are going to use a generator, do not put it inside your house. Do not put it inside your garage either. Again, the fine folks at Flash, hurricanestrong.org, suggest that being at least 20 feet away from your home. Of course, carbon monoxide poisoning is not something that you want to have to deal with. There's already enough going on that you don't want to have to deal with an odorless killer, effectively, that being carbon monoxide. Not something to mess around with. I also wanted to let you know that now's the time to make sure that your garage door, if you do have one on your home, let alone is reinforced, these bars kind of on the back side of it. You can purchase them at most home improvement stores, but you want to make sure that your garage door closes and creates that seal, because if any air is able to rush into that garage door, remember, that is the largest opening on the exterior of your home, let alone any of your other windows or doors. That garage door is really going to be key here, because with any air that can rush into the garage, that creates a pressure differential on your roof, and let alone causing damage to your roof. With enough air rushing in and you have a great enough pressure differential, that's how the roof of your home gets ripped off. Again, I'm not trying to frighten anybody. I'm just letting you know it's called the balloon effect. And any civil engineer knows all about what I'm talking about here. And again, you can get all of this information on hurricanestrong.org, and you can check out the checklist there to make sure that you and yours are hurricane strong this season. So again, we're probably going to be wrapping things up here soon, so get your questions in. If you want to ask Cappucci a question, now is the time to do so. But I believe Cappucci, you're looking at the ensemble graphics there.
Yeah, so we're actually getting some new models right now. So remember the 18Z, so like the mid-afternoon models hadn't run by the time we started this. They're now kind of running right now. And at first glance, we take a look. Of course, the American GFS model and the European model aren't ready yet, but some of the more specific hurricane models, once again, are really clustering right over Tampa Bay, right here. So in orange, we see the National Hurricane Center's official track right now. But look at this clustering just to the right, so just to the east. So honestly, I think they're going to shift east a little bit more, which everything is kind of pointing towards a worst case scenario for Tampa Bay at this point, given this sort of the track, the intensity. I want to kind of break down the scenario for Tampa Bay. So this will look like a bucket of spilled paint, lines everywhere. Don't get overwhelmed. We'll walk you through it. So every line you see is a weather model. The bold ones are like the main model. So the blue one is like the main American GFS model. The red one is the main European one. Then the thinner blue and the thinner red lines are us taking those big main models, tweaking them a little bit, and running them again to simulate a wide range of possibilities with each system. So the American GFS model, the main model, brings it very close to the coast. So does the main European, actually this average of all the European model tweaks very close to the coast. The main European model is a little farther offshore right now, but actually the new run that just came in pushes it farther east. So really, things are kind of clustering into a bad situation for Tampa Bay. And keep in mind, a worst case scenario track would be one of these right here, near or just offshore, which would funnel a ton of water towards the coast. Now, if the European ensemble track, this one right here, winds up actually verifying, you'd have a lot of more complicated surge issues because you'd have onshore winds for a while, then offshore winds, and look at all the kind of inlets over here. So surge would be really chaotic and difficult to model, which is why we kind of broad brush our predictions for surge. That's why when it comes to sort of predicting and preparing for something like this, you could see up to 5 to 10 feet of surge in here. Most folks won't see that. This is a top 10% forecast, but somebody most definitely will. We're just not to the point where we can really resolve until we know where the hurricane's going. All the individual creeks, the inlets, the weird shapes of topography, all that stuff. So Mike, it's imperative anyone here makes preparations to run from the water but hide from the wind.
Keep in mind, folks, that this is a part of Florida that really does not deal with hurricane landfalls. It certainly doesn't happen very often. I saw a tweet earlier today we retweeted from the MyRadar account from Phil Klotzbach from Colorado State University. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that knows what he's talking about with hurricanes. It's that guy along with Dr. David Ruglicki. But again, it hasn't been since roughly 1921 or so since that part of Tampa has seen a storm of this intensity. So again, it's important to not get wrapped up in the winds there. Remember that there's a lot of water being pushed inland with this storm surge. Here is Ian right now on the MyRadar app. We have some folks that were just asking not too long ago regarding if it is going to be impacting Cuba, and then the answer to that is absolutely yes. It is doing so even as we speak right now. Watch those onshore bands just slamming into Cuba. In fact, if you guys want to take the visible satellite graphic here that I have up on the weather graphics, of course, we're losing sunlight really quickly here, but either way, it's just a wild image to see. You can just watch as all of those, that convection happening here. Of course, convection, we're talking vertical motion of the air here. Look at that. I mean, you guys want to take that in full here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I mean, Cappucci, we were looking at this yesterday, and you really saw a lot of that towering building. Yeah. I mean, there's that center right there trying to form. I'm trying to key in on as close as I can. You can really see the spin now. Remember, it's a Category 2 at this point, folks, with wind speeds at around 100 miles per hour. Going to likely intensify pretty strong here over the next 12 hours, where we'll see it become a Category 3. And at that point, again, with how warm the water is, if you've not traveled and been to the west coast of Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, this time of year, I mean, it's effectively like stepping into a bathtub where, your body temperature is 98.6. Right now, the Gulf of Mexico is at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that is very, very, very warm. This is hurricane fuel. This is what it really, really enjoys. I mean, just watch as those bands just slam into Cuba. So our thoughts are with the folks of Western Cuba this evening. But if we switch back to the MyRadar app, again, we're going to tap on the layers menu here. It looks like the stack of cards. I'll wait for the guys in the back to pull it up. Big shout out to Matt and Jack behind the scenes. Those guys have really been kicking butt today. So I don't know what we would do without the folks behind the scenes here. And yeah, I mean, we really don't know what we would do without those guys. So if you guys want to take the app here, I will show folks the what we're seeing with Ian as it works its way northward here. So I still see the visible up there. But again, it is a rapidly evolving kind of situation here. As it works its way northward, the water is pretty warm as it continues to push its way northward here. Again, roughly 80 or so degrees. So whenever you guys are ready to take the app there, I'm ready for you guys here. There it is. Fantastic. All right, so the layers menu looks like the stack of cards there on the toolbar here. I'm using an iPad for what it's worth. A really great way to use the app. Of course, it's great everywhere. Big shout out to our Windows developers as well. Matthew, if you're watching, the Windows app is awesome too. And I'm a Mac guy, and I will say the Windows app is fantastic. So looking at the layers menu here, I'm going to turn on the hurricane tracker layer. And in fact, we're going to go back here and turn on the wind speed forecast. I don't even know if we've talked about this yet, Cappucci. But this is really important, particularly when we're talking about that storm surge. This is showing you the arrival of those tropical storm force winds, 45 or so miles per hour and above. You can see starting in about an hour or so, portions of Cuba will be dealing with that all the way until 2 o'clock in the morning. So a long night for Cubans that live on the west side of the island there. As we head into early tomorrow morning, I'm going to zoom in here right roughly around 8 a.m. For the Dry Tortugas, Key West there. It is going to be a bumpy ride to wake up to early tomorrow morning. We continue to work our way northward here. And how about that? Again, late Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. That is where folks in Naples, Bonita Springs, Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Sarasota are all going to be dealing with those very strong winds. So again, that's arriving overnight as you work your way tomorrow evening into Wednesday. So you still have plenty of time to make sure that you and yours are prepared. And if we do see this track its way farther inland, well, again, you're likely to see those the real swath of the winds move again inland along with the track of the storm. As we continue to work our way northeastward, heading into Wednesday evening, that is where we may see those winds stretching from Tampa all the way to where we are right now. In fact, you can see that blue dot on the map. That's us. That's right here, the MyRadar office here in Orlando, Florida. We, of course, will be here to make sure that you are covered in terms of all of the impacts from the storm. But again, Cappucci, this is troubling as this continues to push its way eastward here. Again, I see that you have there, it's hard to see here on a small screen. But again, big shout out to the folks at Weatherbell. Again, more amazing modeling there. But again, as we see this track move further inland, that is where further problems continue to arise. And before I toss it over to Cappucci, again, big shout out to the folks that are watching in the chat, asking us questions. We're going to get to some of your questions here in just a moment. Cappucci, take it away, sir.
Yeah, most definitely. So one thing I want to point out is that the trend is not our friend in Tampa Bay. Here was a European model run early this morning at the crack of dawn, showing you where the storm was simulated to be. Here is a more recent weather model. Take a look. It jogs east. I'll show you the before once again. Oops. Here we go yesterday. Hang on one sec. There we go. Before, early this morning. Now, it's slowly trending east. The other thing I want to point out, too, if we put this in motion, you know, most models sort of have the same broad depiction. The storm will kind of run towards the coast, maybe wobble offshore, slow down, which is even worse for surge because it'll just keep piling water against the coast and overstaying its welcome, then move inland. But watch this. It kind of wobbles back and forth. So ready? It goes inland. It kind of wobbles east again, wobbles west, kind of goes back and forth, goes up and down a little bit. Like it does these weird wobbles. We call these trochoidal wiggles or trochoidal wobbles. Basically, picture a spinning top. You know how a spinning top will kind of spin and it'll do these weird little tracing arcs of its path? Same thing could unfold here. It's difficult because there's so much randomness and kind of chaos involved in predicting where these things will occur. None of the models can handle it, and this might be such a nail biter to Tampa Bay that it winds up being down to like trochoidal wiggles, trochoidal wobbles. Subtle differences of just a few miles will make an enormous impact on how bad the surge is in Tampa Bay. So ultimately, Mike, it comes down to things as silly as I don't want to say silly, but as sort of random as if the hurricane decides to wobble left or wobble right a little bit, which we just cannot predict even more than a few minutes in advance.
Mother Nature is fickle. We are teeny little specks when it comes to the sheer power and the magnitude of the forces here at work. If you guys want to pull up the iPad here that I've got pulled up, I've got that tweet from Phil Klotzbach. We're going to get to more of your questions here in just a moment, and then we're probably going to wrap things up so we can get ready for our next update coming at 11 o'clock. That's when, of course, we will have the next big shift where things really could get cooking from the National Hurricane Center. Here's the tweet I was referencing earlier. Again, I highly recommend you follow this gentleman on Twitter as well. Since 1851, 5 major hurricanes have tracked within 50 miles of Tampa. The last direct major landfall on the Tampa Bay area was the Tampa Bay hurricane of 1921. We're talking 100 or so plus years, folks, when this part of the world has dealt with something like this, let alone making a landfall, being as close as 50 miles. So we just had Hurricane Fiona setting all sorts of low pressure records for our neighbors to the north up there in Canada, but now we have yet another hurricane likely to impact and set additional records as it works its way toward the west coastline of Florida. I want to bring up this tweet here from our news contributor Colin McCarthy. He's U.S. Storm Watch on Twitter. Big shout out to Colin. As he says here, some pretty alarming rainfall totals from the icon. This is just a weather model, folks. This is not a forecast. We've showed you a lot of models so far this evening, but it's just like how when you were to write a book report, if you were to look up something on the internet and go by that first thing that you see and base your entire thesis on that one point, you are doing a disservice to yourself and to those that you are presenting the information to. So when you see the spaghetti models, when you hear Cappucci or I or Erica Lopez speak about the forecast, we're looking at many, many different things. But I want to show you this one particular run, again, looking at a lot of model runs, but how about this one, Cappucci? This is really jumping out, right? Look at the gradient here and how tight it is. I'm going to zoom in here on Tampa Bay. That is showing you roughly 3 or so inches of rainfall to the south of that white line. Look just above it. Again, that's in inches, right? 23, 24, upwards of 25 inches of rainfall. Those are big numbers.
Oh,
you don't need me to tell you that.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out too, if we can bring back, let me pull it up real quick. Surface moisture dew point. I want to talk about why the bullseye of rain might actually be north of the storm center rather than to the south, because keep in mind, we have a dry air trying to work in from the north, but it's amazing to see. Georgia and Alabama will see like wintertime humidity or lack thereof. Florida will see, of course, tropical humidity from this system. Whenever you have a gradient, a boundary like this, that squeezes all the moisture out of the air. So watch, as we go through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, this boundary is just sitting in place all the way towards Friday. So it comes as no surprise that eventually we're throwing all this moisture up like this at the boundary. It's going to come down to the north. So really, Mike, I'm very concerned about someone near this boundary, North Florida, well removed from the storm center, who might not be expecting it, seeing a ton of rainfall. And Colin really illustrated that quite well. Going back earlier on to your remark regarding the frequency of high-end hurricanes in Tampa Bay, you're exactly right. You know, Tampa Bay, they see plenty of tropical systems. However, very few are these high-end storms. That's why we say, you know, you might have your uncle who says, I've lived here since the beginning of time. I've been through tropical systems before. Don't base your actions off past occurrences, because really, you know, all the green, all the blue, those are lower-end storms. Let's filter out only like category 2+. And you'll notice suddenly most
big
of
drop
these
off.
Drop off markedly. I mean, look, we have 1944, 1933. The only one that really took this worst case scenario path was right here, the unnamed one in 1921. That took the path just north of Tampa Bay, throwing water towards the coastline. Otherwise, these ones, I mean, yeah, they were windy days. They were very windy, damaging winds, but none took that worst case scenario surge path that some, we emphasize, some of the models are suggesting this time around.
Right. I mean, 1921, folks, that was a very long time ago. You don't need me to tell you that. All right. I think we've been going on for quite a while here. Again, this guy behind me here, I'm pretty sure he must have some batteries or something hidden away somewhere. I think he can keep talking all night long. I guess I could do the same thing. But again, at some point, we've got to get prepared for this next hit coming up at 11, and particularly, as we've just discussed, a lot of changes here rolling in. The storm surge threat, very real. The rainfall threat, very real as well, let alone, again, the wind speeds. That is how these storms are categorized, by the wind. That is only a teeny tiny little portion of the story. So we're going to wrap things up, I think, at this point. Before we go, guys, if you want to pull up the social media handles up above so I can give those a quick little button as I drop this notepad on the floor. All right. As I mentioned before, we're going to be giving away Cappucci's book here, Looking Up the True Adventures of a Storm-Chasing Weather Nerd. There you go. In order to win the book, all you need to do is follow us on Twitter. It's right above my head, right there, at MyRadarWX. Follow us, slide into our DMs, our direct messages, send us a message, let us know where you are watching from, and we will pick one lucky winner and send them the book, which may or may not be autographed, but of course, only the winner is going to know that for sure. All right, so before we go, Cappucci, any final thoughts before we get prepped here for the 11 o'clock hit? Eastern time, mind you?
Yeah, I just really want to focus on this. Don't base your actions on what has happened in your previous experience, because again, it's previous experience. If it takes a path that it hasn't taken since 1921, you're not going to have something in your lifetime to compare this to. Again, this is not the end of the world. We want folks to prepare, stay abreast of our forecasts. By preparing, by staying educated, information is empowering. You can make the right choices to stay safe. This and every episode of Intense Weather.
Well, how about that? We have folks in the comments here that are Cappucci. They're saying that they like the change of pants from the khaki. So big shout out to the pants. Look at them modeling the pants there. Good stuff. Again, folks in the comments, I see you, Sandy Rose. You're always here. Love that. Again, big shout out to everyone that stayed tuned for this update here on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, not Instagram, everywhere else. We're everywhere nowadays, folks. We're even on TikTok too. Be sure to follow us there. Some great information there. Again, you can follow us all above my head here. If you're watching on YouTube, click that like button. It's that thumbs up. It really helps us break through that YouTube algorithm, which has really been in our favor here lately, which is great. It's getting that information to the people that really need to see it. Of course, subscribe to the channel. That's totally free. And click on the notification bell, also free, to let you know when it is that we're going to be dropping a new video, or of course, whenever we go live as well. One more thing that's free, that's the MyRadar app. It is on every major mobile platform. It's on the Amazon Alexa as well. I imagine I just activated some of yours at home there. I apologize. The Xbox, we are there too. Microsoft Windows, we're nowadays. I hear you folks out there that are asking for a Mac-based version of the app. I'm telling you, the developers, the hardest working developers in the industry, they have a lot of really cool things cooking. So any neat features that you want to see in the app, slide into our DMs and let us know what it is that you want to see in the MyRadar app. Our developers are always listening. Again, I think that that's probably going to wrap things up for this particular hit here. Again, thank you so much for watching. Again, we hope that you and yours are safe. Again, hurricanestrong.org. For our friends at Flash, they have tons of great information there. I highly suggest that you go through their checklists and make sure that you and yours are hurricane strong. And Cappucci, I think that's probably going to wrap things up. Again, for meteorologist Matthew Cappucci, Dr. David Ruglicki, we've got, I forgot to mention Aaron Jajak. He's on a plane right now flying to Florida. He is going to be chasing as well. In addition to Mr. Cappucci behind me there, he's going to be chasing too. So we have so much more coverage coming in the coming days. Dr. David as well is going to be here in studio tomorrow doing his John Madden impression and drawing all over those weather maps, getting a deep dive at this dynamic system as it continues to work toward the west coast of Florida. So again, that's the end of my spiel, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and stay dry. We'll catch you back here in the next one. See ya.